was really why I ended up originally booking Guiding Light, because I was doing that and my confidence in myself grew, and my feeling it was okay to succeed.
Okay. Tell us how this happened for you. Coming on the Guiding Light.
I had, before Guiding Light, I felt like I had screen tested for everything. I just kept screen testing, and then it wasn't me, and it wasn't me. And actually, I had screen tested for Guiding Light just about 6 months before for another character, the character of Mindy. And they told me later that what they said at the time was they were watching, they said, yeah, we like her, but she's just not really a Mindy, she's really a Beth. But they weren't bringing on Beth at the time. So, 6 months later, and my agent at the agency I was with had left, and so I wasn't really getting much representation, but they called and asked for me.
Really?
Betty Rose casting remembered me, and it was a great scene. It was a great scene. It went from A to Z. It was a pretty long scene, actually. I remember it, but it was great, and I loved it. And they brought me in a couple times in LA, and then they flew me to New York to screen test. But the funny thing was, I was screen testing with Grant Alexander, and we had done the scene multiple times, and it's an emotional point you had to get to in the scene, and it had gone superbly. I'd done the dress rehearsal. Everything was firing. Everything was great. And when we went to tape, I realized that I was getting to the place, and I hadn't set myself up. I had certain choices to set myself up to where I needed to go, and I hadn't done them, really. And so I thought, well, they'll let me start over. I'll pretend that I can't remember my lines. And so I said, I'm up, which I wasn't. I knew what my next line was, thinking they'd let me start from the top. Well, they didn't. They said, okay, we'll pick it up right there. And I thought, But you have to dig deep sometimes. Yeah, so I did, and I got where I needed to be, and I did it, but I left crying. And Betty Ray, I remember her comforting me, and she said, "Why are you crying?" I said, "Because it was terrible. It was terrible. I messed up that screen test," and left and said, "Okay, it's okay. It's done. You're certainly not going to get that one." And then, lo and behold, that's the one that
they called.
They called on. Yes.
So what did you think at that point? What was your emotion when you got the phone call?
It was so mixed. It was great. But I had just moved into this nice little house in LA, and I was going to be moving back to New York. So I had all of these mixed feelings. You imagine this moment in your head, and you always think it's going to be, balloons and flowers and jumping up and down, and it's not always that way. Even though I was thrilled, and I remember, just before I booked this, in that same month, I remember looking at my checkbook and thinking, how am I going to pay my rent? Because I had $500 left in my, that was it. And
so that was time.
And so I got booked that job. I'm not sure how I would have made that.
Well, in my hand, I'm holding this book called The Guiding Light, The Complete Family Album, and it's a special anniversary edition by Julie Pohl with Callie M. Haynes. And I looked through it in preparation for this interview, and it blew me away. It took me back some 20 years to the beginning of the story of Beth and Lou Jack. You had the character Beth had some wonderful love stories. Oh my goodness.
Generally, I have to say I feel very fortunate that I played this character, and not only because she did have some wonderful stories through the year. It was a very rich character, but also she was a complex character because of her childhood with physical abuse. It created a complexity in the character that gave me a lot of range, and through the years, people that watched it from the beginning to the end certainly saw a lot of different phases that Beth went through. And I know sometimes those were a little frustrating for the fans, sometimes when Beth would not be who she traditionally was, that she would be conniving or what have you. But as an actress, it was an incredible gift, because often on soaps you are playing sort of the same character. But they got to a point where they would oftentimes use me as a sort of device to move a story forward. And they would have Beth go a little crazy and do something a little crazy. But it was wonderful. But I was very happy at the end. They brought Beth back to herself, which was that she was strong, and she was a strong, centered woman at the end, which I thought was very important for fans to have closure and feel good about this character.
Well, for the fans, talk about the loves that your leading men on The Guiding Light.
Well, I was also very fortunate there.
Yeah.
Grant Alexander was just is a wonderful friend of mine and a wonderful actor. And I think you could probably see, if you watched through the years, you could see that there was incredible depth that the two of us were able to have together, and that was really born of trust, that we trusted one another completely, and not just as actors, but through the years, we'd had one another's back in different situations, and so there was a real trust there, and I think that came across in our scenes. But I was also very fortunate, too, that, I worked with Ron Raines, who was so wonderful and so much fun, and David McDonald, so talented, and we had such fun together. And John Driscoll, I had my, the younger man.
Yeah.
So it was so much fun. I was just incredibly fortunate, and of course I can't forget Michael O'Leary, who, so much fun that we had together, and so I'm so fortunate.
Wow.
The people I get to work with.
So I have a couple of questions. Going back to when you got casted, now you were a recast, right?
I was a recast, yes.
Now, how did you feel about, did you feel pressure to...
I actually didn't. I had not seen the first Beth, so I didn't feel any pressure to be anything other than what I was. I will say, though, that my first time, which was 87 to 91, when I was first on Guiding Light, was a real shocker for me, though, in that there's so much material that you're performing when you're on a soap, and most of us, certainly, I can say this about my education, was really geared more toward the theater,
Right.
and films. That's what my education, as far as an actor, prepared me was for the theater, and it's wonderful. But there was so much material. 40 pages of dialogue a day, and I was working every day, and it was really it was a real challenge. So it was interesting when I went back to the show. I knew how Beverly McKenzie, the wonderful, wonderful Beverly McKenzie, I knew how she had worked, and how Michael Zaslow, who people remember as Roger, I knew how they worked. They both learned all of their scripts on the weekend.
Oh, yes.
And then they would. So when I came back to the show, I said, I'm going to work as these two consummate professionals worked, and that's what I did.
So explain how did that work, because 40 pages a day is a lot. So you would take it home on the weekend.
Basically,
for the whole
Saturday and
week.
Sunday were spent entirely learning my lines. What was great about that was I could plan the highs and lows throughout the week, so that my week was sort of a cohesive week. There was an arc to of course, there's an arc to the day's story as well, but there would be an arc to the week as well. So it was a wonderful way to work, and then too that you've worked in it on the weekend, so it's there. But then I would go over it each night, of course. But it's there. It's in your being too if you've worked on it that much before, as opposed to just learning it the night before.
One quick question. So you're studying and you're doing these 40-page scripts a day. How do you, or what did you do to separate yourself? Because I feel like you can get lost, your own self.
You can. I wouldn't say it's not that you get your own self gets lost, but what can happen is that, especially when you're doing these emotional stories, that you bring that home. And I remember at times going through a time where it was a lot of emotional stuff going on, and my wonderful husband coming home and him really taking care of me, because you have taught your body to respond to this, this
cues.
emotion, and you're playing you're plucking these strings like an instrument. Well, it's going to take its toll, just like that sort of emotion would in real life by the end of the.
We need to get him on the show because he will be like, "You put me through some stuff."
This is, I'm curious, like 40 lines a day, yes, you study 40 pages a day, you studied on the weekend. You're human. I mean, unless you have a photographic memory, you're going to forget. Did they have like cue cards up just in case?
No.
How did that work?
You're thankful for that because you can imagine if you're working with cue cards, the other person that you're working with cannot be right there looking in your eyes playing that scene with you. They're going to be looking over
At the cue
to
card.
the side, and you're not going to have the same kind of scene. What does happen, I'll tell you, is your short-term memory becomes incredible. And it's just, it's something that you develop as you are working on the show. The more you're doing, the better you get at remembering your lines, and you also start to know basically what your character
would say. Okay.
So that's there as well, but there's something that a muscle.
Now, out of The Guiding Light, you wrote a book called Lorelai's Guiding Light. Now, is that based on your character? Okay, let me just set it up. Okay, so Beth disappears, presumed dead, and she comes back to the Guiding Light, and you're playing the Beth coming back to the Guiding Light, but she's not Beth, she's Lorelai, and she has no memory of being Beth when she was with Lou Jack. Okay, so you wrote a book about it. So how did that come about?
Well, first off, I have to say, Lucky Gold was the head writer at that time, and when he told me that he was going to be doing this, he was very generous in allowing me to have some input on who this other character was, because I was not, they wouldn't tell me if this was another character altogether, or this was another aspect of Beth's personality. So that, they didn't let me in on all of this stuff, but he was very generous in allowing me to create, or not allowing me to create, but to have input on who this character would be and where she was from and what have you. So what I ended up doing, because I didn't know if she was a separate character or if she was part of Beth's personality, I wrote a backstory for her from the point of view that it could be either that this separate character's backstory, her childhood, would mirror Beth Rain's backstory, but that it would be one that ended up empowering her in a different way. So they were very different, but there were some similarities there as well. And so I wrote that, and then with a book packager, a friend of mine, she said, "This is fabulous, and you can write a diary." And in fact, that's something I do as an actor. In this type of thing, I will write a diary for my characters. So we started going around and pitching that, and St. Martin's Press was interested in it, and so that's how that came to be. But it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. I love doing that.
Amazing.
And I always thank Lucky Gold for
I would never think that a writer would let you take their character.
He was so generous in allowing me to have some input. I mean, he was allowing me to say where the story would go. And in the Lorelai's diary, it starts out before you see her on the show. So that was a wonderful process too, getting to write that, because that was, just my imagination that where she was before she shows up in Springfield.
So what would you say was your most, because I want to bring you back to the stressful moment. What was your most challenging storyline?
Well, Lorelai was very challenging, and that was challenging, but originally it was a little scary, because I remember I was off for a month and trying to put this character together, and how she talked and how she walked and all of those things, and that was difficult. But there was also another layer to Lorelai that was really interesting, because Lorelai was not Beth. So when she pretended to be Beth, I couldn't act as Beth had acted.
Right.
It was Lorelai's version of Beth. So there were
She didn't really know
three
that.
different characters. Exactly. There was Lorelai pretending to be Beth, and then there was the actual Beth that I had played for years and played afterwards as well. So there were three characters. So it was very interesting, but very gratifying to play as well.
Help me out. Did Beth ever remember the Beth before losing her memory?
Yes, I mean, she did come back to herself ultimately, where she had a moment where the two personalities sort of meshed, and then they had her in some therapy and what have you to help her integrate these two personalities.
Yeah.
And I mean, you didn't see a lot of that, but because story was moving on, so you didn't see a lot of that. But I did. They did have her in some therapy sessions, so you got the idea.
Okay.
And I guess all the fans want to know about the wedding, the big wedding with Philip.
Oh, yes. Well, one of the things, of course, we had our original big wedding back in '91, and that was the only thing that I'll say that was frustrating for me at the end of the show, was that we didn't actually see Beth and Philip remarry. And we, I think, knew at the end that they had remarried, but we never saw it. It was sort of 1 year later kind of thing. But, of course, they had to pick and choose
Right.
what weddings they were going to show, and they didn't have time for everybody to do that. So, but that was, if there was one disappointment, that would be my only disappointment in the end of the show, that we didn't see that.
Now, the character Beth also marries Philip's best friend. Times during the show where you just wanted to go to the writer and say,
Like, look,
no, this does not make sense. Did you have that liberty, or you just have to keep your mouth shut and just go? How does that work?
There are definitely times as an actor that you'll look at it and say, now wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. I don't think this character would do this. But I'm always pretty good at justifying the things. I mean, when I looked at when she married Alan Spaulding, Philip's father, I looked at it from the point of view that she was also...
Justify that.
She was also involved with Rick Bauer at the time, Philip's best friend. And how I looked at it was, she was always trying to get back to Philip. But Philip was presumed dead at this point. So she was always trying to get back to him, and there was another Philip. So here she had Alan Spaulding, where he was Philip's father, and she was living in the same house, and so it seemed like this life she had had with Philip. But of course, Alan is a very different personality. But Rick, on the other hand, his personality, or his kindness and goodness, was more like Philip. So between these two men, she was trying to find Philip again. That's how I justify it. So it all worked for me.
Good job.
Because you are the character Beth. How did the Beth, after the memory loss and gain, put Lou Jack into her memory? Because Lou Jack was really the love of her life, even though she loved Philip eventually.
Yeah.
How did you handle that?
I think Philip, I didn't really have to handle it so much because, of course, Lou Jack didn't come back. I didn't, but that would have been another interesting justification, because I always viewed it from the other point of view, where Philip was the first love, and yes, Philip went through the bad spell where he caused Beth to go blind, and but that he was still her first and best love. So, and then of course they had children together, so that was another whole layer of that relationship. So I like I said, I didn't have to justify the reject, but I would have.
So, I mean, do you miss it all?
Very much so. I will say, for a while, although I was very sad, of course, that the show went off, I was very tired. You know, it takes an emotional toll on you, this type of work, and the way I work, it does. And I was tired. I needed time to just be a mommy, and that was very gratifying for me. But I did miss it, and I miss it a lot now, I have to say. I miss many of these people are good friends of mine, and of course we still see one another, but we don't see one another in the same way. And that kind of thing that occurs when you've worked with someone for years, and we would work out our scenes together. You know, none of us were the type that we would just get up there and do the scene when it was time for the take. We didn't do that. We would work on them before and figure out our moments. And it was collaborative, and it was wonderfully artistically satisfying. So I miss it. I miss it so much.
So if Guiding Light were to come back, would you be interested in going back?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, to play that character and to work with these people that I love so much. I mean, Tina Sloan, you know, played my mother on the show, and we are still so close and such good friends, but just don't see one another all the time. To see her all the time, to see Grant Alexander, to see Michael O'Leary, Ron Raines, all of these, Liz Kiefer, all of these wonderful, wonderful people that I love so much, to see them all the time. It's just such a treat.
Okay, let's just suppose it comes back, and I know you're not a writer, you're an actress. What would Beth be doing at this point? What kind of storyline do you think?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure, because they really brought her at the end, because she had gone sort of crazy at different times, but at the end I think it made it pretty clear that she was in a very strong place as a woman. She'd come into her own at that point. So the only thing I can say is I would really want to see Beth as a working woman, as a professional woman at this point, that she, of course, has a good relationship with Philip, but it's soap, so they would have their problems, but that she takes care of herself, because if there was one problem I had with the character of Beth, she was very rarely working. She was always being taken care of by someone, by a man, and I would really like to see her as a professional woman if the show does
come back.
Yeah.
Beth Raines, Spaulding. Okay, she was obviously married to Phil Spaulding, but she was married to quite a few other characters on the show. Can you say the full name of Beth Raines? Okay, give it a try.
Okay. Beth Raines Spaulding. She was married to Rick Bauer first, but was that a real marriage? Now I'm trying to remember, and I was there, but I can't remember.
Okay, so we got the Bauer in there.
So we got the Bauer in there.
So
Beth Raines Spaulding. Then who was the next person? Bauer. Did I marry Rick after that? Maybe. And then I'm not sure. And then when I came back, now wait a minute.
You were married to Nick. You were married to Nick, right? The guy that was the architect for Alice.
No,
you didn't marry him.
I didn't marry him.
You didn't marry him, but you almost married him.
I almost married him, but I think Philip dragged me away from that. I think yes, he did. Sherry Stringfield was there. I remember she was trying to make us get married. But let's see. So there was Jim LeMay. Now, when did he come in? Did he come in before, after? And then there was Prince Edward.
Let me help her out.
Winslow. There was Winslow. I was married to.
You were married to.
Edmund Winslow, and then I was married to who else after that?
Goodness gracious.
I didn't quite get married. And then there's Spaulding again, because there's Alan Spaulding.
Okay.
And then there's Philip Spaulding.
Right there.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm making a mess of this.
Okay, so Beth Raines, so in the order in which you remember.
I think it might be, maybe that was a real marriage. Beth Bauer, of course the fans are going to know this too, and it's so embarrassing. Beth Raines Bauer, Spaulding, LeMay, Winslow,
You got it. Come on.
Spaulding.
Spaulding.
So I think that's it.
No, Reardon?
No.
No, okay. Okay. Wow, that's a lot.
Spaulding.
Yes.
Yeah, it says, no.
No, because this book is it was put out in 90-something, I can't remember, maybe
Okay.
96 or
So
something.
this predates.
So
It's missing some marriages. It's missing a few marriages.
Yes, great.
That's amazing that as an actress that you're able to integrate all these different relationships. And how do you do that? I mean, it's in another interview, the actor was saying like soap actors and actresses are like the hardest working people in Hollywood and in the entertainment
They
industry.
are soap actors. I would say are the workhorses of the industry, just because you're putting out so much material
40
every
pages.
day, and and all new material. It's not like you're performing the same play again and again. It's a new play every day that you're putting out. So they're very hardworking, and for the most part, very down to earth. Certainly, Guiding Light was very. Most of the people were very down to earth.
Yeah, about reunions. Did you work at all with Robert Bowe?
Robert Bowe?
Yeah.
I didn't work with Robert that much. I love Robert. He's such a, just fun to be around, just a good guy. But we didn't work together. We rarely worked together, although my character did interact with Mallet way back when Mark Derwin was playing Mallet. Rob Bogue and I rarely interacted, a couple of times, but not too much.
Only reason I mention it is because he's going to be in our next episode.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
He's such a wonderful actor and just a wonderful person too. Just a good guy.